Hello, my name is Paul Gosling and I manage the recommended list for cereals and oilseeds at the AHDB. Over the next few minutes, I just want to give you an overview of the new spring barley recommendations for the 2025-2026 recommended list. Before I do that, I just want to give you a quick overview of the summary of the trials for 2024. Although the winter crops suffered a lot, spring barley trials generally performed well, with plenty of moisture at establishment. Some trials were lost due to significant field effects, and lodging, but most of the trials came through to harvest successfully. Disease levels were not especially high, particularly compared with the winter crops. We've made some changes to the processes that the RL uses to select varieties this year based on the review that we did in 2022. The importance of untreated yield in variety selection has been increased. New target ratings have been introduced for all diseases, and the varieties are expected to meet those targets. If they don't, they need to show a good reason why they should still be recommended. Automatic recommendation based only on yield has ended, and now all varieties are reviewed by committees before being added to the list. The committees will continue to review the criteria by which they select varieties and adjust them in response to the changing requirements of the industry. That happens every year. It doesn't just happen when we do a review. And new for spring barley this year, we have net blotch resistance ratings. This has been something growers have been asking for a while. It seems that net blotch is becoming increasingly common in spring barley. We also know there is reduced sensitivity to several classes of fungicide now present in net blotch. So we've reviewed the data we collect, and we think we now have enough data available to produce good ratings. There's good resistance range across the varieties, and you'll see that as we go through the varieties today. So moving now on to the actual recommendations. We've got 4 new potential malting varieties on test for brewing and malt distilling, and 1 feed variety that has been reclassified from malting variety to a feed variety. So the 4 potential new malting varieties, as I said, they're all under test for brewing and malt distilling. From Syngenta, we have SY Arrow. From Agri, we have Firecracker. Also from Agri, we have Ptarmigan, and finally from KWS, we have KWS Endurus. And there's just 1 variety being removed from the list this year, Nos Monroe. So the next few slides, we'll see some tables that look like this. What these tables show is the new varieties, and they're set against some varieties currently on the list. The 2 varieties here, LG Diablo and Laureate, are some of our most important varieties, Laureate dominating the market for malting barley, while Diablo is popular in Scotland. And we'll look at the main characteristics of the varieties and see how they compare against those older varieties. So starting on the left with SY Arrow, yield in the UK of 104%, ahead of Laureate and well ahead of Diablo. The East yield, again, well ahead of the 2 comparators, and the West yield, although bracketed, so that means limited data, it is ahead of Laureate and well ahead of Diablo. And the North yield also ahead of both the comparator varieties. Mildew for spring varieties, spring barley varieties, pretty much standard, 8 across the board. It has a 5 for brown rust, so that's the same as Laureate, slightly better than Diablo. Rincosporium is a 7, again, same as Laureate, better than Diablo. Net blotch is a bracketed rating, so it's limited data for Arrow. It says an 8, which again, the same as Laureate and better than Diablo. And those disease resistance ratings give it an untreated yield of 87%. That sits between Diablo and Laureate. Specific weight is reasonable. It's about the same as Laureate, not as high as Diablo, but certainly not a problem. And the lodging, limited data for the 7, so that's better than Laureate, the same as Diablo. And in terms of ripening, it's fairly similar to most of the spring barley varieties at a +1. Moving now to Firecracker. 103% in the UK, so not quite as high as Arrow, but ahead of Laureate and Diablo. 102% in the East, again, just ahead of Laureate and Diablo. Very high West treated yield, but that is bracketed, but 106%, well ahead of Laureate and Diablo. North treated yield, 103%, again, ahead of Laureate and Diablo. Mildew, an 8. Brown rust, the same as Arrow, a 5, the same as Laureate, just ahead of Diablo. Rincosporium, a little bit disappointing, perhaps at a 5, but that's the same as Diablo. And net blotch, so bracketed, is a good rating of 7, better than Diablo, just below Laureate. And the untreated yield at 93% puts it at the highest untreated yield of the spring barley varieties on the RL. So that's something that will catch the eye of many growers, I'm sure. Specific weight at 68.8 is good, with the lodging rating bracketed at 7. Unlike many of these varieties, it is +1. Moving now on to ptarmigan. Again, 103% in the UK, slightly lower in the east at 101%, so matching laureate, but a good west yield, they're bracketed at 104%. North yield at 103%, same as the two previous varieties, and ahead of Diablo and laureate. Mildew is an 8, same as the rest. Brown rust a 5, the same as the two previous varieties, and matching laureate. Rincosporium is a 6, so between the two comparative varieties, with a 7 for net blotch, though again it's bracketed. Untreated yield is good at 90%, just ahead of laureate, and specific weight is good at 69.4, so certainly no worries there. Bracketed lodging rating of 7 matches Diablo, and it is slightly earlier ptarmigan. It's one of only two varieties with a naught, and I'm sure that will be of interest to some northern growers. Finally, these new varieties, KWS Endurus, slightly lower UK yield at 102%, that matches laureate. East yield is 101%, again matching laureate. West yield bracketed, so it's limited date 103%, matching laureate. And the north yield 102%, slightly ahead of laureate. Again, mildew is an 8. Brown rust rating is a 4, that's below laureate, but matches Diablo, and has a good rincosporium rating of 7, matching laureate. Net blotch is a little bit lower at a 5, that is a bracketed rating. And despite those ratings, it does come with an untreated yield of 91%, which beats laureate. Specific weight is 67.9, so that's about the same as laureate. And it does have good resistance to lodging with an 8, well ahead of laureate, although that is a bracketed rating, and ripening is a +1. One thing to remember, of course, with these varieties is they're still under test for malting and brewing, so we don't know yet whether they will be given full status as malting varieties, so beware when you're picking these varieties, you need to make sure you have a market to sell them into. This slide gives official comments on the varieties I've just talked about. I'm not going to go through them. You can pause the video and read them at your leisure. And the same applies to this slide. Now moving on to our single feed variety for this year, Nos Gambit from Sonova. This is actually a variety that was recommended last year as a malting variety, but it failed in the malting process. It wasn't proceeded with in that testing program, but it came back into the list, was reassessed as a feed variety, and it's been added to the list as a feed variety. So again, I'm comparing it to some varieties already on the list. Hurler and Skyway are official comparators. They're the varieties that the committees use when they're comparing new varieties against. And I put laureate on there as it is the most widely grown spring barley. We're coming back to Nos Gambit. UK yield 104%, so it matches Hurler and beats Skyway and laureate. East yield 104%, again matches Hurler, beats Skyway and laureate. West yield 105%, so that's higher than Hurler, higher than Skyway and laureate, so it's got a good west yield. North yield is 102%, so not quite as high as Hurler, but higher than Skyway and laureate. Mildew, fairly standard for spring barleys, is an 8. And brown rust is a 5, so better than Hurler and Skyway, the same as laureate. Rincosporium is a 6, that matches Hurler, but one below Skyway and laureate. In terms of net blotch, it's got a good score of 7, same as Hurler, better than Skyway, not quite as good as laureate. Untreated yield of 90% is good, so that's higher than all the other varieties here. And specific weight at 67.8 is no problem at all, matching laureate. Lodging without PGR, it's a bracketed figure, so it's limited data, it's a 7, so that's the same as Skyway and better than laureate. And in terms of ripening, like many spring barley varieties, it's a +1. Again, I won't talk over this slide. This gives our official variety comment for Gambit, and you can pause the video and read that at your leisure. So not many varieties added to the list for spring barley this year. We've got those 4 varieties under test for brewing and malt distilling with high treated and untreated yield, and an early variety for the north with good untreated yield. Then there's one variety classified from malt to feed with high treated and untreated yields. Thank you.